Today we're going to explore binge eating disorder, and how common they are. I'll give a quick overview first before I dive into the statistics and clinical criteria for binge eating disorder. The basic definition of binge eating is where you eat a lot of food, you eat it really quickly, and you feel really bad afterwards, like really bad. That's it. That's what a binge is. We'll go through the disorder definition a little later. Now, the statistics of binge eating, we're going to do a quick breakdown right now so that you can see how common this disorder is. And it's important to realize that these statistics, we're going to be doing the disorder. We're going to be looking at how common binge eating disorder is. And you'll see that it's actually kind of common. And if binge eating disorder is common, what about people who just binge eat? What if people who have a problem with binging, but they don't have the disorder? Like that was me. In high school, I wrestled and binged. In college, I binged. I never had the disorder. I had a problem, but I never had the disorder. So how many people have the disorder? And what does that number tell us about the number of people who have binge eating? Let's do some quick math. Boston Medical Center, and there is an in-depth article down below with links to everything. It breaks down the math in greater detail and writes out all the clinical criteria. You can check that out, link down below. And then if you also love this content, please like and subscribe. You know the drill. Check out the Eating Enlightenment podcast on iTunes, where we spread the information about how to see food differently, just like we're doing here today with binge eating disorder. We're shifting our perspective around food. Boston Medical Center says that 45 million Americans each year attempt to lose weight. 45 million, okay? Now, I'm going to do conservative numbers so none of y'all can get on my back. I'm going to bring down these numbers even lower. So we're going to say 40 million. That makes sense. The weight loss industry in America is worth 72 billion, and that was back in 2018. It's a lot of money. We got 40 million, $72 billion industry. It makes sense. It's a big industry. NADA, the National Eating Disorder Association, which, they're biased. I want to call them out on their bias, but they report that 30% of Americans seeking weight loss treatment can qualify for the binge eating disorder. That's the disorder. That's not binge eating. So if we got 30% of 40 million, right? There were 45 million, but we're being conservative. We're bringing it down to 40 million. 30% of the 40 million qualify for the disorder. Now let's be even more conservative. We brought down from 45 to 40. Let's bring that 30% down to 20%. Okay, let's just do 20%. So we have 40 million, 20% of 40 million. That's going to be 8 million people. 8 million people with the disorder. 8 million with the disorder. I was one of the people who binged but didn't have the disorder. I mean, this is where we get creative and we can just guesstimate. But at least every person who has a disorder is matched by at least one person who binges but doesn't have the disorder. And in my opinion, it might be 5, it might be 10. I mean, look at, man. We are trying to diet. America, we're the Western world, we're trying to diet. And guess what? We're getting fatter every year. Because dieting leads to binge eating. We all know that dieting doesn't work. Purposeful weight loss, you lose weight for 6 months, a year, it comes back even more and you get the binges. You get the cravings. This is one of the biggest perspective changes that eating enlightenment represents. And it's controversial, but purposeful, intentional weight loss backfires. It causes and leads to binge eating. We need to see this. If you struggle with binge eating, you need to know that you are not alone. There are at least 8 million other people with the disorder. There are probably double, triple, quadruple that. That's like 50 million people pretty soon that struggle with binge eating. You're not alone. Now, let's go into the clinical criteria for binge eating disorder. There are 2 must-haves. In order to meet the clinical criteria for binge eating disorder, you must have a lack of control that is distressful. So you lose control. That's one criteria. Number 2, you eat a large amount of food in a short amount of time. Usually that is defined by a 2-hour limit, and the amount of food is actually subjective. So let's go through these 2 criteria. You must have these to have binge eating disorder. Lack of control, eating a large amount of food in a short amount of time. Now the next 5 criteria, in order to have binge eating disorder, you would need to have 3 of the next 5. They are eating rapidly, consuming a large amount of food when not hungry, eating alone or having impaired social relationships, feeling absolutely disgusted and ashamed with yourself afterwards, and then lastly, this feeling of distress, this really sense of stress. Finally, the last criteria is that you do not have anorexia or bulimia. Bulimia is where you throw up after you eat, basically. You sometimes use laxatives, you can exercise too much, but bulimia is where you compensate. Anorexia is where you don't eat. So if you have those symptoms, you do not have binge eating disorder. So that's the other criteria. And then finally, the other finally is you've binged at least once per week for the last 3 months. So you can see how if you're binge eating once every other week, or if you binge really heavily for 1 week and then you take you're feeling better for the next week, that would not meet the criteria for binge eating disorder. You would still have a problem with binge eating, but you wouldn't meet the disorder. So when we're talking about the 8 million people who have the disorder, I mean, at least double, triple, quadruple that amount struggle with binge eating. When we look at the obesity rates, pretty much not every person who's bigger, but a lot of bigger people who are trying to diet, they don't see, they're in this, I don't want to go off on a tangent about the diet industry, but we know that purposefully trying to lose weight doesn't work, and oftentimes it leads to weight regain. And this weight regain, where you gain even more weight, is related to binge eating. So, I mean, those numbers are astronomical, right? Like 70%, I think. So when we say 8 million down here, it's 20% or 30%. These are really conservative numbers. And that's what I want to communicate to you as we kind of wrap up this video. If you want more information, you can check that article down below, or like or subscribe for more. But the intention behind this is just to, I get angry about this weight loss industry, and the shame that's around it. I want there to be light around eating, a spiritual light, if you will, like an understanding that this is a problem. Like back in the day, we kind of all suddenly realized cigarettes were bad for us, right? We all kind of realized, oh, cigarettes, like, shit. Oh shit, this is a problem. Let's change our habits. But binge eating is it's shameful. It's hidden. It's embarrassing. And that's just my simple message today. Based on the very conservative numbers, there's a lot of other people struggling. People who are normal, who live good lives. It doesn't mean that your character is bad. It doesn't mean that you're any way inferior. There's a lot of weight discrimination out there. Binge eating is just something that happens, like cancer, or it's not your fault. It doesn't say anything about you. It happens to everyone. That's my point. It happens to everyone, okay? So don't be ashamed. Get some help, and let's wrap up today. There's a playlist on one of my shoulders that has me interviewing a bunch of eating disorder experts, a bunch of experts about how to heal your relationship with food. You can check that out. Also, be sure to like or subscribe. Really appreciate it.